And we're live.
Woohoo!
So tonight, we thank you everyone for being here. Tonight we're going to discuss alignment. Alignment is good and you should use it. That's the end of the stream. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Stream done. See you next time. Yeah.
Alignment. So here's the thing. Did you want to start or should I?
Okay. Do you have my alignment chart still?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yep.
You have something
Sure
to bring
do.
up? Okay. All right. So I'll let you handle like the on-screen thing because StreamYard I don't.
Yeah. Give me 1 second to.
But
the new
why
one,
don't
right?
why don't you go ahead and look that over and start with however you want the conversation to go? Because I could talk about alignment for a long time because Planescape is my favorite setting in D&D.
Okay. So let's do this. We will do.
And I will preface it by saying I think alignment is a great role-playing tool and a way to train new role players. I think it is genius. I think that it's one of the few things, if not the only thing, that Wizards of the Coast did better once they acquired D&D and created 3rd edition. And I'll leave it there for you to take.
All right. So
why is the bottom cut off?
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, the quotes are cut off.
Oh, I need to scroll it.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, perfect.
So let's see if I can fix that.
Cool. Okay. So
There
to
we go.
preface this is an alignment chart that I made for my new players to teach them how alignment works.
So first,
I will also say lawful and neutral evil got swapped in position thanks to Bacon.
it's after a conversation that we had. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to start by saying that your labeling of the columns and rows is not something that I've ever seen anyone attempt to do before, and you've done so in a very interesting way. There are conversations that each of those rest on.
Yes.
But we can have those maybe later this stream, maybe. In fact, it'll probably have to be a later time. I'm not feeling great. I think it was something that I ate today.
Oh, no.
I don't want to not stream, but I don't think I can go all the way out to 11 or 11:30. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
We'll start, and if I'm feeling good, we'll keep going. If I need to end, we'll end.
Okay. Sure.
So I've never seen it labeled quite this way before.
And I don't
in chat. I can't see you at the moment. I'm actually focused on the
defending the indefensible, says Druidenfoot.
Yeah, I did see that bit.
Okay. Well,
but
we'll go there.
Focus on self, focus on
Yes.
situation, focus on others as the X/
the
good or evil or neutral. Yes. And then according to principle, need, or impulse with regard to lawful or chaotic, the lawful chaotic continuum. So I really like that. I think that it works really well.
And I think I never saw anyone else label them that way either. I'm not claiming to be the innovator of this because I'm sure that I picked these up from I've been gaming since the 90s. So
sure. I've never seen it before. Whether or not you created it, you're the first person who's shown me these particular labels. So,
sure.
I think that I love alignment charts.
I do.
I love them because they are typically incorrect, but they're typically incorrect in interesting ways that spark conversations. So
yes, you've said that.
I don't want to flatly call yours wrong. I don't necessarily think that it's wrong. I just think that there is because alignment tends to be so simple, because there's 3 points along 2 continuums. It's a very easy gradation to sort of teach, which is why I'm sure you use this to teach new players, because it's evident and it's very self-explanatory so long as you're familiar with Star Wars.
Right.
But there is nuance here that I think is lost due to the general simpleness of alignment. That doesn't mean it's not useful. I actually quite like alignment. So the conversation that initially kicked this off was you showed me this, and you had Vader as lawful evil, and you had Palpatine
Yeah.
as neutral evil. So Vader
Yeah.
was according to principle, and Palpatine was according to need. And
Yeah.
then I got into the conversation, and I specifically called out Palpatine because, in my view, something that would make someone shift on the alignment chart would be something that defines their character to a point where it affects the overall story or environment or world or universe or whatever we happen to be viewing. So with Star Wars, it's a story. So, and then I brought up the fact that because Palpatine's adherence to the rule of two is so dogmatic, he's likely the best, most fastly adhering character to the rule of two that we have in all of canon. And then I broke it down by like when Maul comes back, he's already moved on to another apprentice, so he views Maul as a rival, and that all precipitates a huge story arc through the animation series, and so his adherence to the rule of two really does affect the world in very real, very large ways. So that's what I thought.
Just to be clear, I only put this chart together based on the original trilogy.
Right. So, you did mention that, and I did pick up on that. It's very clear that you did this on the original trilogy.
However, I still do concede that Palpatine's better lawful evil and Vader's a better neutral evil, because neutral, according to need, means you can change your position depending on what it is that you need at that moment, and Vader does so by the end of Return of the Jedi.
It's a focus on self, and it's according to his need, and I think that's probably where he sits. Now, with regard to chaotic evil in Jabba,
I'm going to fight you on this one.
This is the one. So this is the one, and I know that this isn't in defense of yet, but we'll get there. Okay.
Sure.
So we're just going to have the conversation about alignment, about the charts, about the interesting conversations. Maybe we'll have an interesting conversation, and then we'll get into the defense of alignment. So Jabba as chaotic evil. Well, before we even get there, Yoda is lawful good. Luke is neutral good. Leia is chaotic good. I think Lando is lawful neutral. Boba Fett is true neutral, and Han is chaotic neutral. I think those all land very, very solidly. And then, obviously, with the change that you've made for Palpatine and Vader, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see it. I think that those now land more soundly than I think I initially received them as.
And I would agree, given what your arguments, and which is great. This is kind of thing. This is the reason we have these kinds of.
Yeah, sure. So then, chaotic evil as Jabba, right? Now, this was the interesting piece of this conversation, right?
Okay.
Because the case that I made, right, was that Jabba, in his local behaviors, right, he throws dancers down to the Rancor. He seems to be very impulsive and very mean, but he's also a member of a larger organization, the cartel, and they are very, very rules-laden.
Okay. So here's the thing. Like, again, I have to try and divorce myself from my knowledge of the EU and the massive backlog of non-canon Star Wars stuff that has
Legends or whatever they're calling it now. It's
well, I mean, it's, to me, that's more canon than Disney Star Wars, but whatever.
I'm with you.
I mean, Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy is still fantastic. I have my issues with the way he writes, but the storyline, I would have loved to see that be the sequel, the actual sequel trilogy. I love Mara Jade. She's one of my favorite Star Wars characters. Talon Card, same thing. Anyway, but from the perspective of only the original trilogy, which is, again, what I'm doing with this chart, Jabba the Hutt is the first time we see a Hutt. He is the tent pole, if you will, of Hutt behavior.
Yes.
We don't know if other Hutts are organized into a crime syndicate around the same way that he runs everything around him.
True.
To our perception, only watching the movies, by the time we get to the Return of the Jedi, he's Tony Soprano.
Okay, sure. So I'll tell you what then. I'll tell you what. Let's go through, because you did this according to the original trilogy. Let's break down our.
I'd love to break down every single one of them. I can give you the logic behind it.
Well, I want to stick to Jabba. So let's break down Jabba as the audience is taken through his particular, albeit short, timeline in the film. So we know that at the end of Empire, Han is frozen in carbonite.
Now, keep in mind, by the way, he's had a presence since the first film.
Yes, he has. Yes, he has.
Only by mention. But we know that he employed Greedo.
Yes, he did employ Greedo.
We know that he's after Han because Han agreed to ship something and wasn't able to complete it because the Empire forced him to dump his cargo. And now, and from that point, Jabba's after him.
Yes.
And dead or alive, doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So Han, when we first meet Jabba, he is obviously bombastic and disgusting, and I mean he's a giant slug, and so he's running this, to borrow a phrase, hive of scum and villainy. And so breaking it down, like, he receives Han Solo in order to make good on a debt that he's owed, right? So that's why he has Han in carbonite.
Right.
And that seems pretty evil. So I think he lands squarely in evil.
Sure.
Right? He's a mob boss, he's evil. So then
I don't think anywhere on that particular spectrum of focus on self to others. Absolutely. Right. There's no argument that's where Jabba lands.
So then Leia as, what's his name? Bosch, I think, or her name. Is it Bosch?
Busk. Bussk.
Oh, okay. So she shows up as this bounty hunter persona to, I can't quite remember. Does she attempt to buy him back first, or what's the deal?
No. She walks in with Chewie and she pulls
she threatens to blow the place
on him. And Jabba appreciates it, laughs, and says, "This is my kind of scum."
And lets her stick around because
chaotic behavior right there.
Right. So I like you. You can stick around.
Yep.
Now that is chaotic behavior. I agree.
The reason that works is because Leia is chaotic, and so is Jabba.
Yes.
Yes. You could what we had Billy D. Williams infiltrate. I'm calling him his actor name. Anyway.
I think we were doing that in our conversation the other night. I wasn't calling their character name. I was calling them all their actor name. So Frank Oz is lawful good, and it's funny to do that.
You were doing that, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny. Anyway, regardless, he'd infiltrated Jabba's palace beforehand, but he hadn't gone in flamboyantly. He hadn't He hadn't flown by the seat of his pants. He'd infiltrated as some dude who he was pretending to be somebody else. Like he was approaching it from the lawful perspective, right? He's like, "Hey, I'm a bounty hunter too. Here's my creds. Go ahead and let me in." And once he gets in, he follows the rules, and so he's not in any position to actually do anything until the actual confrontation goes down, right?
Okay.
Leia walks in. So Leia walks in.
Well, hold on. We have now one chaotic decision that resolves the scene with Jabba. Yeah. And we have one ordered or lawful decision that got us here, because I would argue that Jabba executing a contract hit for someone who has deviated from a contract with him or some sort of debt that's owed is very much a lawful act. It's also very much an evil act. But I think that saying, hey, we had a deal, you have not made good on this deal, therefore I get to execute this particular activity as
Therefore, I get to.
agreed.
Yeah, but
I would argue that's a lawful act. So there, now we're kind
But-
of balanced,
but-
right? So we've got one
but-
lawful, one chaotic.
no, I don't disagree, but Jabba didn't specify the conditions of crossing the boundary, right?
No, he didn't.
Dead or
There were no
alive,
specified
and he
conditions,
didn't.
and
And he's totally satisfied by Boba Fett bringing Han frozen in carbonite,
Mhm.
dead and alive.
Yes,
He's Schrodinger's mercenary at this point, just to hang him on the wall.
I am perfectly
it's a
happy.
thing.
I'm perfectly happy to chalk this up to film expedience. We don't really need to know what the details in the
hold on.
well, we don't really need to know what the details of the contract are in order for the story to progress.
Right? No, we don't.
But we do know that there's a contract, and we do know that's why there's a hit out on Han.
But okay. Okay, so that's a little bit of a non-diegetic. That's a little bit of meta gaming, if you will.
We're going to get into more if you don't.
For sure, absolutely we are. But diegetically, we see Jabba the Hutt as a mob boss who, whenever he is crossed, is willing to inflict suffering on the people who he perceives as crossing him, regardless of what form it takes.
Right, but it is also whenever he is crossed. So there is
Right.
some, and it might just be a personal code.
But here's
right?
but here
It
but
might just
here's
be a personal moral code or a personal code
and
that
that's
he has
the
against,
good to evil. That's the good to evil spectrum.
I
What
don't
you're-
know.
So you're mixing. I
don't think that's the good evil spectrum. I think that
absolutely
I think
it
that
is.
the
How
good,
could it
no,
not be?
I think the good evil spectrum would be how he executes on his reaction for having been slighted,
No.
right? So
No,
if
no,
he's
no.
going to throw someone into a rancor pit, that's evil, right?
Yes,
But if he's going to take them to the authorities, have them booked and put in jail, that's
that's
good,
lawful. That's
right?
not good. No, that's lawful.
Okay, you're
So
right.
Here's the this is, and after our first discussion, I figured out that this is, I think, where the disconnect comes from, and I think this is probably where the disconnect for most people comes from on this grid, is the conflation of good and lawful versus
Yeah, and now we're going to
versus
get into
evil.
Batman, and I really don't want to go into Batman.
I didn't put Batman on this chart. For
I know.
a reason.
This is a callback to previous interaction.
Yes, I know. Batman is lawful. Batman is chaotic. And
So let me rephrase. Right? He could forgive him. That would be good. It could also be chaotic, right?
Yeah, sure,
So
absolutely.
that would be good, and it would be chaotic. But instead, he decides to, throw dancers into rancor pits or
Right.
get, hire contract hitmen. That's
Specifically, he decides to throw slave dancers who he has paid money for into a rancor pit to get eaten because for one dance, she didn't want to come and get licked by him or whatever else the hell he was going to do to her. And so he gets fed up and he just dumps her in to get eaten.
And
regardless of the monetary cost, regardless of the aesthetic cost, regardless of any other cost.
I think that's a strong point in the favor of chaos. I think
also
you could hold on one moment. You
Sure.
could kind of wax and massage and try to figure out a way to make that like seem lawful, like, oh well, if it's a personal code like I was just talking about and he was slighted, or if she wasn't making good on what she was there for with regard to dancing for entertainment or whatever, then like that argument could be made. I think it's a disingenuous argument, and I think that it's one that doesn't really help define Jabba as much as knowing that it's likely a slave that he's paid for that he's now just throwing into the Rancor because he was bored, right? Like that's really what happened. He was bored, so he threw her to the Rancor because that was more exciting than the dancing that he was witnessing.
Yep.
That's pretty chaotic. So I'll agree with that.
And going to the chat just now, Loiger, who I haven't seen in the chat before, welcome. Thank you for coming, and thank you for participating. But
yes, for real.
He or she or whatever, Jabba would rather hang Han on the wall as a trophy than use the debt to extract more value out of him. That seems pretty chaotic to me, and that is exactly the train of thought I'm going down as well. It's like, it doesn't matter. Okay, there was a verbal, there was not a legally enforceable contract set up between Han and Jabba. To Jabba's mind, the extenuating circumstances that caused the contract not to be fulfilled don't matter because it only impacts him and how he feels about the situation. Thus, when Han is delivered to him in carbonite, it doesn't matter, dead, alive, or in this form that he can hang on the wall as a trophy. It fulfills his emotional investment,
which is a focus on self.
No. Okay, here's the thing. This is what people don't get about the alignment chart. The emotional fulfillment is the columns. It is the left to right. That's the emotional fulfillment the character is seeking. The top to bottom is how they fulfill that need, or how they fulfill that that requirement, so to speak. So
that would make them both emotional, which would be my view. I would view that there's emotion in both columns and rows.
Yes,
it's just a matter of like the drive of the emotion and the intention of, the outgrowing action or behavior.
Yes,
from the emotion.
No, that is true to an extent. So if you want to look at this chart, you could say that the bottom right corner is pure emotion, and the top left corner is altruistic logic. And then you could do a diaspora between those 2 points. However, I know what you're saying as far as the way that humans relate to each other and the world around them is emotional at its core in every sense. Yes, 100%. However, you could also view it as the top of the chart is an expansionist viewpoint, or a broad-minded viewpoint, a viewpoint that takes in multiple perspectives, and the bottom of the chart is a singularity, whatever you want to call it. It is focused inward and only upon the self. And when you combine those two emotional axes, see here, that's like, I know that the original alignment chart was purely law versus chaos, and it comes from Michael Moorcock and all that kind of stuff, right? And Conan the Barbarian and all the authors surrounding Lovecraft and their group, right? So the original, and Shadow Dark pulls this in, like that's all they have in that. That's all that Kelsey put into that system is just law versus chaos, right? That's one axis, pretty simple, straightforward.
That's what DCC does. DCC does chaos.
DCC does the same. Most of the old OSR does it that way. Law versus chaos is the only axis, and that's fine. I don't hate that. It works, and it is a nice diametric opposition, and the extremes of Circle of Hands, actually, by Ron Edwards, does the same
Which
thing.
I have,
actually.
but still haven't read. I need to read that.
Circle of Hands is great, in my opinion.
It's out of the gate is very interesting. I've read like I think maybe between 5 and 10 pages, and it's very, very interesting out of the gate.
It is, and it's leaning on the same idea as the law versus chaos idea, and the idea too is that both of those at their extremes are law is stultification. It is the lack of movement. It is
stagnation.
It is stagnation at the extreme, whereas chaos is so unformed that you cannot. It is complete lack of form. There is no point of reference, right?
Both of them in their extremes create the impossibility for life.
Exactly. So you have to have a balance between the two in order to make what we conceive and perceive of as reality and can exist within.
Yes.
To me, the genius of the 9-quadrant alignment chart as related to this, like, it really solidified with the Great Wheel cosmology and Planescape in D&D 2nd edition, which is my favorite D&D setting. It's like you've got Planescape at the top, and I will credit Planescape Torment, the computer game, to a large degree for making that so, which has a Bible and a half's word of words written for it, 1.2 million, I think, words in that game. It's the best game I've ever read and the best book I've ever played. But right under that is Dark Sun, which is also 2nd edition. Because Dark Sun is a setting in which true neutral rules. But like the authority structure is evil for sure, but everybody in there is just concerned with survival, essentially. And pretty much when you're true neutral, just like Boba Fett, anything goes as long as you come out on top. It's basically what it is. So, so you've got the kind of chaos versus order axis, which is not really emotional. Yes, we relate to it emotionally as characters or as players, but the law to chaos axis is about how close or how far, if you will, okay. Wow, I am all over the place tonight. Okay.
No, you're doing great.
True neutral, most NPCs, every beast or animal or kind of non-player, non-sentient kind of character or entity that you interact with in the world is going to be true neutral, generally speaking. Because I wonder if we should talk about why I came up with labels for the axes before we even get into this.
If you think that it's essential to the conversation, I would say yes, and I'm happy to learn why.
Okay.
I will say that I don't know if I agree personally that everyone in the world is true neutral, or everything, or every creature that creeps upon.
Not necessarily, but that is like.
Look, I understand the view, and I'm willing to grant it. So it's not something that I necessarily hold to personally. But if that's what makes the chart work, then that's what we're talking about. So I'm totally fine with it. I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Okay. I'm actually, we haven't talked about this before, so I'm actually very interested to hear about why you don't necessarily think that works.
Well, as is the case with most things, I think it boils down to particulars and individuals.
Right.
If you zoom back far enough and take an average, then yeah, probably neutral, true neutral. But I think that once you begin to case things out on an individual basis, you'll see that there's, I think, just drastic deformation of the chart. That's all. I find
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all.
No,
But I
that
think that looking at things in aggregate, especially if we're going to be including like animals, survival instincts, and whatnot, like I think that that's a perfectly reasonable view to hold.
right. Okay. So if you want to, okay. Okay. Here we're going to get incredibly geeky, and this is
Do it.
why.
Lay it on me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. The alignment chart, as I put forward, literally only works in the Great Wheel cosmology of D&D, and it's probably the main reason that we only see this particular kind of treatment of alignment in D&D, and it is still at this point I would probably posit it is the only thing that remains unique to D&D.
I think that not only do I agree, but I think that it is an essential part of the character of D&D and
100%.
D&D derived games. So I would also think that Pathfinder is a part of that group,
Right.
as well as some other games. So any game that uses the 5e rule set, any game that is,
if you use 6 attributes in a D20, you're in that family somewhere.
I would agree, and I think that it is
or
essential.
3 attributes. We cut it in
It is
half.
essential to those types, and there are reasons for that. But I don't want to dive onto another topic until you've gotten your explanation out. So please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this alignment chart as if it was looking at the Great Wheel from the top down. You've got sigil at the top of the spire pointing directly at your face. True neutral, where magic doesn't even work, is the outlands. And that is where even according to the lore in Planescape, even your own emotions start to get grayed out. Like everything feels gray, right? There's no flavor to anything. True neutral is survival with no other concerns. It is existence with no other concerns. It is the center of being, if you will. And then as you go along the spokes of the Great Wheel in different directions, you become closer and closer to a particular alignment, to the planes which are that alignment, and which can, as happens to one of the towns in Planescape Torment, and it could happen to any town in a tabletop game, the closer you are to the edge. See, here's the other thing too, is in Planescape, it is a liminal setting where belief actually influences reality. How you perceive what you are experiencing dictates what the alignment of that thing you're experiencing is. And if you get enough people perceiving one thing one way, you can actually shift out of true neutral into one of the other alignments.
Or you can shift from Planescape into the plane of whatever it is that you believe. So, in fact, there's a joke.
That actually happens to one of the towns in Planescape Torment.
Yeah, there's a joke that Brendan Lee Mulligan has about punching the mayor in the face if you live in Good Town, because you don't want to get sucked into the divine plane of good. So yeah, every year everyone lines up and just punches the mayor in the face because they got to do something to keep from getting sucked up, right?
But that moves you towards lawful because everybody's got to do it, right? So yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Brendan Lee Mulligan is such a treasure. He's probably
he's
the best.
Great.
He's one of the best GMs alive, if not the, because he gets it right. Like he gets it on a deep fundamental level. And that illustration that you just pulled out is perfect. Like it's so.
I would agree.
Much more consideration that for sure. No, boy, just before we got onto the stream, I was pulling out the how does it feel to watch all of your favorite franchises go down in flames to bacon. Yes, for sure, this is more thought than anybody who's running WotC at the moment has put into it. Well, I don't know. There's maybe one
this is
or
a good
two.
point. This is a good point. When your Bic lighter stops working, you might be annoyed, but you don't experience feelings of betrayal. You throw it away and you get another one. Compare that to Han. Jabba and Han had a relationship, asymmetrical as it was. That's a very good point. I agree.
That's a very, very good point.
And then
which
I apologize for interrupting you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I want to make sure that we get to these comments, and there's going to be a transition, and it's kind of starting, right? So we're getting out of purely discussing alignment, and we're getting in how it applies to D&D systems, and so before we really kind of make that transition in full, I want to get to these comments first, because I think there's going to be a lot more comments.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know. I hope there will be more comments. But
this is a very contentious topic.
Yeah, it is.
Even among geeks. And I think a lot of it where I was going with the Great Wheel of Cosmology is...
Well, we'll get back to it. I want to come back to that. I just want to get to these comments first. So pause on the Great Wheel of Cosmology. I want to come back to that very much. So BGD says, even when used as a poster boy or girl for a particular alignment category, any well-written character from books or movies will transcend any given square in the matrix. That doesn't mean it's broken. I completely agree.
100%. This is another thing that I constantly say about alignment that people, I think, in general don't understand. It is not proscriptive. It does not dictate your actions. It is descriptive. It is a result of your actions.
We are going to talk about that in a little bit.
With blank tendencies, yeah, sure.
We're going to talk about that, whether or not it's proscriptive or descriptive. I think that there's some value to be had in that discussion, but we'll get there. So then PH says, is Leia chaotic? Hasn't she become the leader of the resistance? Excuse me. And Solo started as neutral, but hasn't that happened to him? And he showed more tendencies toward good. So I think that the answer is yes, but you can shift in and out of these, right? So as
you can, and again, it's not proscriptive. You are not locked into the box. This is where your general behaviors direct you towards, and this is also. PH Arbex, I'm not trying to denigrate you at all. Like, I love your commentary, but this is a perfect illustration of the conflation of the two axes with each other that people often do. Just in the first movie, right? Han Solo he's a mercenary. He's focused on money. He hooks up with, he's focused upon, in whatever situation he's in, whatever is going to give him the best feeling. And it might seem like he starts at true neutral, but look at how he handles Greedo. Han shot first. By the way, look at how he handles Greedo.
Han shot. There was no second shot. Han shot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Han shot, and that was it. End of the story. Like and then all the way. Like you could almost put him in an evil, except he's doing things which in the moment will support his friends, and mostly that's Chewie, but it's also the people that he's got on his ship. Like he still has some kind of a relationship with them, and so even though he doesn't think through what he does, it's all for his group, right? So whatever situation he's in, he tries to figure out the best way to navigate that situation up until the end. Like the ultimate reason that I put that quote beneath his portrait is through the entire film, he's saying, I'm just in it for the money. Like, I'm just doing this because I'm going to get a payday. And then he comes back at the end in that, what Heath, and I see you in the chat, Heath, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Heath's favorite moment, that kind of heroic moment where the guy you've forgotten about comes back and shoots down the TIE fighter, and Cowboy shouts into his microphone and says, "You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home." It's a fantastic moment, and that is absolutely chaotic. It has no benefit to him, but it feels good in the moment for him, right? He's not going to get paid for it. He's already been paid, but he comes back because to him, it feels like it needs to be done right then. And
I also think that in the context of this conversation, it would benefit us to discuss good as what is, the philosophical ought to, or evil is the philosophical ought not. But that's, I think, well outside the scope of the conversation that we're trying to have. But I think without really defining what we mean by good and evil, or what's meant in the chart as good and evil, it's providing a significant layer of ambiguity for misunderstandings to take place. I'm not blaming you for this. This is not your fault. You have a very well outlined, very well described grid here. I think it's just the nature of the beast, right? Like,
yeah.
My idea of what's good is and what the philosophical ought is going to be different from someone else's. It's just,
and it's part of the reason that the modern, quote unquote, modern audience, quote unquote, doesn't want to wrestle with this. Like, there's something deeper here. It is a useful, and every time I've shown this chart to somebody who is brand new to D&D, they're like, "Oh, okay, now it makes sense."
Yeah.
At the certain, like, once you start trying to break it down and all the particulars, yeah, it gets really complicated. But at an emotional level, you look at it and you're just like, oh, yeah, I resonate with that. And that is the whole point of the alignment chart, is because from the spoke of true neutral, what creates the alignments are your emotional investment within those alignments, if that makes any sense at all.
It does.
Okay. So
I want to move on real quick to additional comments. We'll go to Drudenfutz, who says, I would agree that mafia-esque structure could be perceived as lawful from a certain point of view, but I don't think that applies to the Hutts. I think in the original trilogy, as outlined here, it would not apply to the Hutts. I agree. I think that we have to get into... Go ahead.
We can't, as far as only the original trilogy goes, we can't necessarily extrapolate. I never actually thought that Jabba was representative of all Hutts. And that's one of the kind of the oddities that I don't really necessarily like about the EU. I always thought that Jabba was his own guy. And
like Jabba was a gangster. He was just also a Hutt.
He was a gangster who was a Hutt. I thought that, obviously Hutts are their own species in the Star Wars universe, but given the original trilogy, I never implied to my personally.
Yeah, I have something similar with Chewbacca. I always thought that Chewbacca had a speech impediment, which is why he didn't speak Common, Galactic Common. Turns out it's a whole language. I didn't know that when I was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, you could. That's totally actually, given just the original trilogy, that's a totally valid perspective. So there's, okay. We're gonna touch on philosophy and maybe even politics here.
I would ask that we shy away from politics. Philosophy.
No. I'm not gonna talk about anything specific. It's just the idea that any one individual is a microcosm of their entirety.
Oh, sure.
Society, or the race or the planet or whatever that they come from has permeated modern discourse, and I think it's fairly destructive. And I think that that's part of the reason that alignment is kind of out of fashion within the role-playing game community at this point. And
I don't
that's
know if
where
it's
I'll
out
leave
of
it.
fashion. Is it out of fashion?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say it's out of fashion.
I mean, I
Alignment,
tend to be.
the typical D&D alignment chart, the 9, especially the 9 grid one, is generally denigrated.
Okay, see, I
Almost
tend to be very
universally.
out of touch with Dungeons and Dragons in general these days. So I didn't know that was the case. I think that it's one of the most important pieces of that particular style of game.
I don't disagree. And Druidenfuss just put in the chat something. Han is obviously good. He pretends to be neutral, but he's always there for his friends. Yes. So okay. Is he though? Because at the start of Empire, his whole drive is to get away from the rebellion. Like this is one of the Empire is one of the big reasons that I put him in chaotic. Yes, of course. By the end of the first movie, by the end of Star Wars, I tend to not call it A New Hope because that was retroactive.
I think that it's very easy to say this in retrospect. I think that as a fresh audience member seeing it for the first time, I didn't expect him to come back.
Yeah. And then by the same, and it's consistent with his character. At the start of Empire, he's trying to leave, right? He's focused on, hey, this situation I'm in, I have a death mark. I need to fix it. And it doesn't matter that the rebellion is about to get attacked on this ice world and maybe wiped out. I need to leave and go fix my thing. Like, he's focused on the situation, and he's acting chaotically because I need to leave and go fix my thing, but my tauntaun will freeze beyond the first marker, but my friend's out in it, and I'm going to go get him. That's a chaotic guy, right? Like he is the embodiment of chaotic in the Star Wars series.
I don't
it goes all the way through to Return of the Jedi too. Like he's like, look at the way he takes over the bunker, totally chaotic, right? He's like, hey, let's do this thing and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah.
Like everything, he charges down the hallway into a room full of stormtroopers in the first movie. Like everything he does is chaotic. It's like, hey, here, we're in a situation and I'm just going to throw something at the wall and it'll stick.
Yeah. It's I'll think of something. It's the I'll think of something mentality. Yeah. Absolutely.
Seat of the pants. So chaotic is seat of the pants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the way, and I will say all the way through, even up to Return of the Jedi, Han is still looking at the situation where he's in, and he's judging his course of action based upon the situation he's in. It's like the reason that I put him opposite his best friend, right, so-called, is because Lando, sorry, B5 slipping in there. Lando expects that word is bond. That's the reason in Empire he's like, yeah, I've made a deal that'll keep the Empire out of here forever. And then as things go on, he's like, this deal's getting worse all the time. And eventually he switches, not because he has any investment in the rebellion, but because the Empire is not keeping to the terms of the agreement. So both of these guys, like, they're focused not on the people around them. They're not even focused on their own needs. They're focused on whatever the particular situation is that they're in. Like they're not focused. Like this is okay. Let's break down the actual axes, which we were gonna do, and we didn't actually.
Well, hold on. Let's get back to the comments before we do that. And
okay,
hold that thought because that's where we're headed next.
Yeah.
So BGD says, if you characterize alignment by tendency to act on impulse, then sure she is, meaning Leia. But I just say she tends to be decisive rather than impulsive. Leia thinks fast and she moves fast. I agree with that, but I think that I think it still works in the context of this chart because she can be viewed as impulsive, right? Like she's grabbing guns and shooting stormtroopers, and she's very. that
You
is
could also view the according to principle versus according to impulse as according to logic versus according to emotion. It's not as good of a description of the axis, I don't think, but to me that's why I broke it down that way, because Leia's like she like she sits up and she's like, "Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?" And she's like sassing to the one of her captors, like she's irrepressible. But the minute that he's like, "Oh, you mean the helmet?" He's like, "Oh," and she snaps to, "Oh, that message I sent to Ben Kenobi must have brought this guy here." That's quite a leap, right? That is not logical, but it's correct. And she's going with her gut. And then she's like, "Okay, I'm going to throw in my entire lot with these guys who, when I start interacting with all these males, I can't stand them, but they're my best way out of here." And then she's like, "Oh, we're pinned down in the hallway. So, well, there's a grate. Let's go down it and find out what happens. It's better than where we are now." Like she is the most chaotic of all the characters in the trilogy. I would purport,
but
because
is
she
she
does
not? Go ahead.
act on impulse, and sure she is decisive. Yes, decisive. So okay,
But not to be dogmatic about it. I opened the stream by saying that I love alignment grids because they tend to be wrong in ways that start interesting conversations, right?
as we demonstrated already.
I am not in any way, shape, manner, or form married to any of these different alignments or these different categorizations. And I think that there are cases to be made for probably all of these characters, right? Like we could place Han in good. We could place well, I don't know. Yoda's pretty well. He's pretty well ensconced in that lawful good area. But like there are shifts that we could make based on our perspectives, based on our own personal reads of the character. So
And
I think
again,
these conversations are interesting, and that's why I like these charts, because it's going to get people talking. So I don't want to sound
100%
dogmatic
agree.
in any way, shape, manner, or form, because I'm not. I just like to have these conversations.
Dave FF, what is a titter pig? It is a TTRPG. It is a I don't, it's not a backronym, but it is a when you, whatever it's called when you make a word from an acronym. Titter pig is TTRPG, and yeah, so that's it's a very geeky thing.
So going back up here, Drudenfoot
So
says,
I would say the need for, yes, no, 100%. So here's the thing. Again, this is where we get into that the alignment chart is not proscriptive, right? It's not that because you are labeled as this particular alignment, you must behave in these certain ways. It is instead your behavior that trends toward a certain direction will land you in one of these alignments.
so here's
And
the
then
thing, right?
again, that goes back to the great wheel cosmology, the idea that you can actually shift if enough people in a particular town in the Outlands believe and behave in a certain way, they can actually shift themselves out of the Outlands into one of the other planes that most closely matches the alignment that they are demonstrating. So yes, if you take any one singular action from any of these characters in the trilogy, you could probably fit any of them. Like we could absolutely take Luke's action of walking into Jabba's palace and choking out the Gamorrean guards with force as a neutral evil act. As an act, does that shift his alignment? No, absolutely it does not, because he is focusing on other people, his friends, and the situation, what he needs to do to navigate the situation to promote other people. So even though the act in and of itself could be classified as neutral evil, the reason he's doing it is still in alignment with his neutral good.
So
Direction, if you want to call it
I
that.
want to jump back to prescriptive versus descriptive, right? Drudenfoot says here, if it is not prescriptive, then it's just based on perception of other people. Thus, it is meaningless and does not say anything about the person, only about how they are perceived. Don't get me wrong, I prefer to be descriptive too, since that's something that works with my anti-realism, but it makes the whole cosmology pointless. I don't think it makes the whole
Oh,
cosmology pointless, but
very
I
interesting.
am going to make the case for prescriptive alignment, right?
Well,
Because,
okay.
because,
So
well,
it
hold
depends on
on.
how
Let me
far
get
we're
there.
looking,
Let me
right?
get there. Specifically in the case of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and any other tabletop role playing game, right? I am not talking about characters in a film story where the story is complete from start to finish, or a video game, or any of that sort of stuff. What I'm talking about specifically is a character within an imaginary world as you're approaching playing a role playing game. Alignment is prescriptive because when you put lawful good on your character sheet, and this is very meta, and I understand that. So this might not be the perspective of characters in the world, but it is definitely the perspective of the players who are going to play those characters, who will bring some of their knowledge from outside of the game with them when they play. I think that if you put lawful good on your character sheet and everyone sees your character sheet and it says lawful good, they are expecting you to behave in a certain way because you have prescribed specific character actions, at least out of the gate. There may be game events and actions that take place that will turn your character away from an alignment or toward another alignment. That's perfectly fine within the confines of play, if that's the experience that you've agreed on. But I think that alignment is much more prescriptive than people give it credit for in that meta sense. And so as a result, I think that it's both, right?
Okay. You're not wrong. However, I think that that is
Well, I know I'm not wrong.
like when I say that, I mean I don't disagree with you per se as far as what you're specifically saying. However, I
Right.
think that that is a diegetic perspective,
Okay.
whereas if it were actually proscriptive, there would be mechanics in place that would prevent you from changing your alignment, and there are not. There are consequences for changing your alignment, and some of the most devastating spells or curses in the early versions of D&D were the ones that did change your alignment without
Sure.
your consent. However, just because when it's not like you walk around with a badge on your chest.
No.
Your paladin in full knight armor does not have a lawful good badge on his chest,
Nope. Sure
right?
doesn't.
And so that means that it is a determination made diegetically by other people in the universe based on your actions. And you may be focused so specifically on a particular course of action that you willingly choose to be a particular alignment, as a paladin would be in the early versions of D&D, not so much in the later ones, which is why WotC D&D is flavorless pablum. But but that doesn't mean that you are required to act in that way. You as a player, and by extension, your choices as a player character, are still free will. They are so okay. Here's the thing: the alignment chart is not a fate chart, right? The alignment chart is an action chart. It is what you typically aspire to. So the reason I say that most things are true neutral is because they don't have aspiration. Like they are, okay, whatever situation I'm in, I need to make sure I survive. And then I need to make sure that the people around me also that I care about survive, because that makes my life better. And that is a very true neutral type of a thing, right? Anything that's alive will function on that level. The alignment chart starts to represent a particular aspiration. I think that other people, so going on the good to evil axis, I think that I am the most important thing that there is. The world, the universe revolves around me, so every action I take should be to my own benefit before anyone else's. Versus I think that other people are just as valuable as me, so I need to make sure that my actions benefit them just as much as they do me. On the neutral axis, on that vertical, on the columns, I am important. Other people are also important, and I need to make a judgment on how important they are based on the current situation I'm in. Right? Like I have to. The good of the many outweighs the need of the few. This is Spock's view. I have to sacrifice my quote unquote best friend who stole my ship, quote unquote stole my ship in a gambling game. I have to sacrifice him to uphold my responsibility to everybody else in this city. Oh, well, that's not going to work because the people I made the deal with are reneging. So I'm going to go throw my lot in with my best friend who actually didn't betray me. Right. So like this is why neutral seems to vacillate, is because whatever situation you're in, you're gonna wobble back and forth on your focus between what seems to be other people versus yourself. But what it is like this situation I'm in requires this navigation to get out of. Whereas according to, so again, going to Lando, your word is your bond. This is the reason that he betrayed Han in the first place, is because way back when Han went back on his word. It wasn't like he's to Lando's perspective, he stole the Falcon, and well, I can't trust you, and like everything he does. This is why I call him a lawful character. Everything he does is based on that kind of contractual. I'm not throwing shade at Lando, dude.
No, not you.
And I know, but believe me, BGD, I know what you're doing. Lando is one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy. He's awesome, and I love his. He comes across. The reason he comes across as a mercenary in that film is just because of the situation he's put in. So again, he's focused on the situation, right? It's like, I have no good options. I'm trying to make a deal with people, none of whom are actually keeping their word. Like I function on the idea. I function on the principle that your word is your bond, but nobody's doing it. So I'm gonna flip flop across that spectrum until I land on somebody who's gonna finally actually keep their word. And
we know he does keep his word.
What?
We know that he does keep his word. Yeah. Every time he has pledged his word. So he lost the Millennium Falcon in a bet. Yeah. He agreed, even though he doesn't think the bet was,
even though he doesn't think it was legitimate, he still abided by it.
Yeah, he still abided by it. He agreed to deliver these specific individuals of the rebellion to Vader. He did it. Like he every time he pledges his word, he keeps his word.
He keeps his word, whether or not it comes out to his benefit.
Right. And I think that,
but if it doesn't come out to his benefit, he swaps and he goes to somebody else who he thinks will.
Referring back to what I said at the start of the stream, is that if they have character traits that shape the story at large, then that is where they belong on this chart. And I think that you nailed Lando beyond the shadow of any doubt. I think you nailed Lando. I think that he is lawful neutral to a T.
I think he's one of the. I think he's arguably, him and Boba Fett are probably arguably the strongest on this chart.
Yes.
Well, and Yoda. I mean, obviously Yoda.
But getting back to prescriptive versus descriptive, I think that alignment is both. I think that it is necessarily both. I think that because I agree with everything you say, and I think that you're going to agree with everything I say. It's really just a matter of where we're placing the weight, right? So you're weighted more on description, and I'm weighted more towards allowing it to be prescriptive. But I do think that it's descriptive as well. Obviously, it's descriptive because your alignment changes based on your actions in the world, right?
Yes.
And so,
but that's also the what I think is the brilliance of the Great Wheel cosmology, is that once you get to the edges, once you get to the rim of the wheel, it becomes proscriptive. You like
Yes.
everything that exists on the neutral good
Yes.
plane is by nature neutral good.
Yes.
And that's the
And that's
reason
what I'm
that the
going to
plane
that's what
is
I'm about
neutral
to get
good.
to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I'm about to get to. So in the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons, there are gods. They are real. They
Yeah.
can be interacted with. You can meet them. You can slay them if that's where your adventures take you. But these gods have very specific domains, right? And it's actually very granular. Like there's a bunch of different good gods. There's a bunch of different lawful gods. There's a bunch of different neutral gods.
Yeah.
And so within their domains is usually contained the alignment, right? And so, in order
Yep.
for those gods to exist as those gods, alignment must be prescriptive. It must be,
Yeah.
which is why getting to the extreme of the wheel
The gods
makes
of
it.
that thing is the exemplar of that
Yes,
alignment.
yes, which is why I think that alignment is such an interesting, such an essential part of these games because it is both proscriptive and descriptive. Because as
Yeah.
a mortal who follows certain strictures or tenets of any given god, right, you can change your alignment. They can't. They absolutely cannot. They
Right.
are
Otherwise, they cease being that
100%
god.
the paragon of neutral evil or lawful good or whatever it is. And so I think
And
that
and in a
there's a little bit
way,
of it. Go ahead. Go
like,
ahead.
and in a way, that's like, given the way that gods work in D&D, the fact that people believe them to be that alignment means that they cannot change from that alignment,
Yes,
which is a
exactly.
bit of a paradox, but it's a very interesting paradox.
It is a very interesting paradox. And so I think that when we talk about alignment as descriptive or prescriptive, that it seems to be the case that a lot of people think that it's one at the exclusion of the other, and I
Yeah,
don't
no,
think
it's
it has to be
both.
that way. I think that they
Absolutely.
both are not only present but absolutely essential to alignment in Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons and
Yes.
Dragons games.
Which is one of the
So
reasons that I love the Planescape setting above all others, is because it has this deep philosophical underpinning.
I agree with you. Planescape is one of my absolute favorite settings in D&D. I would probably go so far, like you, as to say that it is my favorite.
Yeah.
I think that it tells incredible stories. I think, and especially with the alignment, right? It feels like what they did was they went, well, let's make alignment important to an entire setting, and so they did it, and they did it in such an incredibly.
And then they spun it off into infinite, like, I mean, Tales from the Infinite Staircase, man. Like,
Oh yeah.
you, there is
Hello, Nerdy Ogre. How
there
are you?
is literally no limit. If you wanted to run a campaign, and however you wanted to do it, wouldn't even have to be the same characters, but you could run a contiguous storyline in the Planescape setting, and there is literally no boundary on how long it could go. Like you could do planeswalking, you could do just the Infinite Staircase, you could just do Sigil itself, you could do a whole thing in the Outlands and try and not be aligned.
That would be an insane game. That would be an absolutely Looney Tunes game.
Because Magic doesn't work in the Outlands, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah,
it's
because
just,
Magic's dependent upon alignment.
But even just
alignment,
like I can't tell you how many hours I just spent reading about the individual planes, like Carceri, right? This windblown tunnel network, and like anything you can think of, there's a plane somewhere that aligns with that conception and embodies it in a physical form. It's anyway. We're not talking about Planescape per se, but
but it's a real great example.
It's one of the best settings ever, because there is literally no limit. You can do anything. And here's here's what's so great about the alignment chart is, in a setting where literally anything is possible, how do you apply boundaries? You apply boundaries on a philosophical level, and that is what the alignment chart does.
Yes.
And it does it, and it is both prescriptive and descriptive, But for the player characters, it is not proscriptive. Here's the thing. Okay, I have to tread the minefield carefully, because just because something in a setting, in an RPG setting, is proscriptive does not mean it relates to anything in the real world that the actual player characters relate to in their daily lives.
Yes.
It is only applicable to the setting.
Yes.
So a race that is always evil aligned has no relation to any race in the actual real world. It is only applicable to that setting. So you have to realize that because of the meta level interaction between the player characters and the players themselves, the player characters have a unique form of agency that nothing else in the setting does. They can choose their alignments.
Yes.
By their actions,
yes,
as adjudicated by the GM who represents the world responding to those actions.
Yes.
And this is the key, that nobody apparently at WotC,
including cosmological forces.
100%. And apparently nobody at WotC gets this nowadays, because, we're just going to get rid of alignment. No, the alignment is a tool for the GM to enforce boundaries upon the players, not the player characters, but the players themselves, irrespective of setting, based upon how the player characters, as guided by the player's choices, interact with that setting. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does.
So I think that one of the reasons that before we just real quick before we
go for it.
I think that forever GMs get the alignment chart on a fundamental, emotional, philosophical, subconscious level that most players don't, to be honest.
Okay, sure. I think that there is a great deal of confusion and consternation over alignment charts, for sure. And I think that it's definitely a weakness of the chart, I think. But I think that having the conversation and talking it through is very beneficial in that regard, because I think it clears quite a bit up. So Nerdy Ogre, brand new to the channel. I think I've never seen you here in the chat before, so thank you for showing up. He says Vader and Palpatine should be switched. The Jabba should not be category. Well, funny you should mention that.
You should mention that, because originally I put them that way.
Yes. So
until I talked with Bacon.
Yeah. So this is his Star Wars alignment chart, and it started off with Vader as lawful and Palpatine as neutral.
Yeah.
And then we had a conversation and talked it through, like we're doing here, and they ended up switching. So you can absolutely make the case for either. I'm very happy with that. And the fact that you said Jabba shouldn't be a chaotic evil is an opinion that I have. So we share that. But I think that, much like I said at the beginning of the stream, which I don't think you were necessarily here for, the alignment charts really spark incredibly interesting conversations about the natures and characterizations of individuals, be they in a Dungeons and Dragons game or set to film or in a book. And I think that they're very interesting, very worthwhile, very, intellectual kind of conversations. This is maybe pseudo-intellectual, but so there's that. And then Nerdy Ogre also says, the reason I'm against the D&D alignment system is that it's not defined. You have 7 people what lawful good is, and you could get 7 different answers. I don't disagree with you. And earlier in the stream, I mentioned that what it really boils down to is a philosophical ought and philosophical ought not. So what is good is what we ought to do, and what is bad or evil is what we ought not to do. And so in order to really drive at any sort of consistency in an alignment chart like this, you kind of have to separate the ought from the ought not and really drill down on your own personal philosophy. And that's why you're going to get a bunch of different answers, because the egoist is going to have a different answer from the altruist, right? And so I completely get why you don't like it, but I would also ask that you maybe keep in mind that that's the reason it's that way is because it's just that way in real life, right?
Also,
It's
yeah,
just the
and
way it
also
is.
because, and also mechanically speaking, the especially in D&D, you always have to tell yourself, this is a watchword that I've always played by. The DM's word is law. The DM is God. Like not just a god of the setting, the DM is God in the interaction of the tabletop. Their interpretation and application of the alignment system is how that alignment system works for your group and table. That's why I say I think that this is something where the DMs understand it at a more fundamental level and how it works and interacts than I think the players do. If you're a player who's never been a DM or GM, I'm going to say DM.
Sure.
I'm going to say
You know,
DM specifically because it is D&D specific.
as
I
is
don't
always the
know.
case.
I don't
I
know
would
of any other game system that actually uses this alignment system.
Right, right. As is always the case, I will default to the experience that you want to have, but I would say that generally it's a best practice to allow the GM to define the world in such a way.
Right.
That's how I'll approach that. Now, it's not going to be that's not going to be good for every table. There's going to be different experiences that you want to craft, and that's fine. And in those cases, it's perfectly okay to deviate from that. But I think that with regard to Dungeons and Dragons and games like Dungeons and Dragons that include alignment, generally speaking, it's a best practice to just allow the DM that concession, that control over the world. So I agree.
And one of the cool things about the Planescape setting is how specifically and deeply it defines each of these alignments. You have entire source books about the planes of law. You have entire source book in third edition, at least. Now in second edition too. You have entire source books about the planes of law. You have entire source books about the planes of chaos. You have entire source books about the evil planes. Like they go to great lengths to give you all the specifics about what those alignments mean in that setting. As a DM, if you're going to run that, you don't have any excuse for not applying it as they put it forward. Other than you just, well, again, here's me being proscriptive.
Which is okay.
If you want to run Planescape, I will say you don't have any excuse for not knowing that. And I love Planescape. I've read a ton of Planescape, and Planescape Torment is my favorite computer RPG of all time for a very good reason, because it actually manages to, in a single player, pre-recorded fashion, it actually manages to invoke at least the mood and feelings of interacting with that setting in that way. I mean, they wrote 1.2 million words, so that's like a Bible and a half. Like literally the Holy Bible plus a half, another one. So I don't know that game could even be made today. Not even speaking on a political or philosophical term, and just the amount of effort required to write something like that and have people actually play it. So here's the thing. If you don't like alignment and you don't want it in your games, fine. You can play your games any way you want, and I am a big proponent of that.
Yep,
that's why in multiple conversations before this, I'm like, I don't like the label story game. I don't like the label traditional RPG or whatever else, because they're meaningless. If you're playing the hobby and you're doing a role-playing game at the table and everybody else is on board, go for it. But I do think that, okay, let's step into a more high level kind of meta kind of conversation, which we almost got to in our conversation about time in RPGs, but we didn't quite, and which we'll probably get to in our next stream with Jackson and Ben.
Well, our next stream with Jackson Ben, I think, is going to be in defense of metagaming.
Exactly.
Talk about piss offy topic, right?
Exactly. So, from a metagaming perspective, shoot.
Well, it's okay. Go ahead and sit with your thought for a minute. I'm going to actually run up against a couple more comments. So we'll get whatever you have to say. Yeah. So Nerdy Ogre says, yeah, it's good for a philosophical discussion, but not good for an RPG game. And I think that this is what you were just speaking to. It's if it's something that doesn't fit well for you, if it's something that it just isn't working, throw it away. I'm totally okay with that.
Okay.
But I think that what I
but here's where I was going with that. I just managed to pull my
go ahead.
Disparate thoughts together. Creativity arises out of restriction. And if you want to see the proof of that in action, go look at Alien. Go look at The Thing. Go look at any of the go look at Terminator. Go look at any of the kind of Go look at our what we did something completely different stream a couple of weeks ago. Upgrade, right? $3 million to make that film. Like, if you want to look at restrictions, boundaries, inspiring creativity and creating something great and lasting, all you have to do is look at low budget, especially horror, filmmaking. And you can apply that same approach to RPGs. I think one of the real problems that people have with so-called story games is the lack of boundaries. A lot of story games have very loosely defined rules. And it's not that they're story games per se, it's just that the rule set in and of itself doesn't provide anything for players to sink their teeth into, or the GM. A lot of them are just basically improv games. Nothing wrong with that. I think that one of the biggest strengths of Blades in the Dark, for example, is its improv that's required in order to make it work. However, it has it's fairly crunchy. It has a lot of very specific rules giving you a framework in which to improv. So this is what the alignment system does for D&D, and D&D being a multiverse, as much as that word has become a shibboleth in the last few years. Thank you, Disney Marvel. But the fact that D&D has so many different settings, so many different options, you need something to wrap them all into the D&D umbrella, and that is the alignment system. And it's something that is consistent in every setting, regardless of all the trappings, from first edition D&D, when it was just Law and Chaos, all the way up into, let's say, early 5th edition, as little as they actually employed it. But it is more than anything else, it is the set of boundaries which defines D&D and how it works, regardless of any other trappings of setting. And if you can enforce those guidelines, if you can, as a DM, enact those boundaries to your characters, you can have them jaunting across the plains with impunity and interacting with all of the weird fantasy that you can possibly come up with in a lifetime. But they will still be the same characters and something that can be a touchstone for their players because of this chart right here. So learn and understand this chart, and you will be able to run any D&D game. OSR, BECME, 5th edition, 3rd edition, even 4th edition, because they still have the alignment chart, 2nd edition, whatever edition you want it to be, or any spin-off of D&D. And you'll be able to run a successful campaign if you apply this set of, it doesn't even have to be explicit, as long as whenever the players run up against them, you enforce those alignments in a consistent manner.
Yeah, I think it can be a very beneficial tool for world building, for establishing expectation. I think that it's always been incredibly interesting to me, alignment, that is. And I'm going to get to more comments now.
Cool.
So Heath says, I remember people having a problem with Luke's choking of the guards when it came to a role-playing game because that to dark side points and flip him to evil. So they rationalized that by saying that Luke only altered their minds to make them think they were choking. I never bought it. Yeah, I never bought it either.
No, the whole point of that scene was to show how closely Luke was skating, was balancing on the knife's edge that was shown to us in Empire in the cave. Like, we had his face inside Vader's helmet in the cave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he walks in a black hood, like in a silhouette. He looks in silhouette. He's pretty much Vader already, and he chokes out the guards. The whole point is he's acting according to what is needed in the moment. Again, it's not that he is actually evil. He is acting in a neutral fashion according to the law versus chaos axis versus the good versus evil axis. His chaotic action there does not flip him off of the good axis. If that makes any sense.
It does. And
that's a yes, I completely agree with Heath. I never bought that either. It's like, yeah, you have to.
It's more complex. It's more complex than just getting 2 dark side points for choking a guy.
Exactly.
It's more complex than that. It's
yes.
and I agree with that for sure. Heath also says, "Oh my God, the philosophy of orcishness." Lloyder says, reading AD&D and even 3.5 as a kid, alignment was a mechanic I picked up on to embody a character with personality and identity beyond the flavor of their class race.
100,000%.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with this.
Otherwise,
what were you going to say?
Otherwise, the classic dichotomy of Paladin versus Blackguard wouldn't even be a thing.
Oh, yeah. It's the same class. It's just one's good.
Yeah, it's the same class. The only thing that changes is the alignment. And you get different spells because of it. And anyway.
Following up on Heath's point, PHRBX says, I found the dark side points menace quite frustrating in that game. Never worked for my group. I guess we're simply bad people. That's actually funny.
That's trying to apply the D&D version of good versus evil as a proscription against the Star Wars universe philosophy, and it doesn't work that way.
No, it does not work that way. Rick says, have you talked about why alignment has gone out of fashion? I suspect it was mostly due to weak GMing taking away players' agency to actions that are against their so-called alignment. We didn't talk about this, but it's a really good comment.
That's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which goes back to what I was talking about before. As the primary reason that alignment exists, is in my suppositions here tonight, is as a GM tool, and the GM must understand it at a deep level and apply it unflinchingly and without variation throughout their game. And this is why I think that 2024 D&D, I'm going to call it 5.5 because that's what it is. 5.5e is going to fail, as typically any of the even numbered editions do fail in D&D. I'm going to say that 5.5e is going to fail because of 5e was already hard. I like 5e. I play 5e every week. I don't GM it every week, unfortunately, although I did for a while before I moved out to Texas. It is a difficult system to run. as a GM. And it's because everything that's produced for 5e is about giving the players more things. And it never is about giving the GMs more things to work with. So you have to make so much of it up on the fly. And for a system that's so crunchy, like people say, oh, 5e is rules light. No, it's really not. It's very crunchy. And there's a lot of rules to keep in. The reason people think it's rules light is because they ditch most of the rules. Like homebrew just ditches most of the rules of 5e. It just does. Go watch any go and watch any Let's Play. Go and watch Critical Role or any other Let's Play, and they're homebrewing most of it. If you really as well as Matt Mercer knows the system and he knows it inside and out, you can tell when he's just flying by the seat of his pants. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier too, is that creativity comes out of limitation. Put down guardrails when your players run up against them. Enforce them impartially and unfailingly, and they will love you for it. The biggest problem that I have with starting a new campaign in 5e is okay, what rules are we playing by now? GM, please tell me which rules we're using. And then I can build a character for that. But I can't just go and grab the book. It's not like if I want to go and do a Planescape campaign, I can go and grab the 2e Planescape, and I know exactly the guidelines in which to build a character.
I love the art in the books.
Very, very. Oh man, Planescape's art. Yeah. Everything about Planescape is just so good. The art is so unique. It's similar. One of the reasons that I like Dark Sun is the second one is because of Brahm's art.
Brahm is so good. Yeah, Dark Sun is also a fantastic setting.
But as
it's got its weirdness, but it's a good setting.
Yeah. No, I love weird fantasy, man.
Yeah. It's character. It absolutely has character.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can make the setting as weird as you want. You can make it absolutely gonzo bonkers weird fantasy, as long as you have an underlying set of rules that the players can latch onto, and they'll be able to spin. Doesn't matter how much they know about the setting. Doesn't matter how much they know about the history. Doesn't matter if they are making their character history up as they go along, their backstory or whatever. As long as they have a set of rules to latch onto and build off of, everything else will spin out of that. It's your job as a GM to know those rules and enforce them consistently. And this is one of the big strengths of the alignment system, is that you can always latch on to the alignment system regardless of setting. You can swap, and you can go in a Planescape setting, and you can swap from a neutral good plane to a lawful evil plane, let's say, and know what you're gonna get.
Yep.
You may not survive it, but you know what you're gonna get.
Yep, I agree. Truden Fudd says metagaming is defensible. Looking forward to that. Maybe I'll add that to the stream on her, or add that stream, pardon me, to the curated playlist about metagaming on my channel. That would be fantastic. I would be very honored to be a part of the list. Yeah, that would be great. It'd be as I mentioned in our previous stream with Jackson Ben, there is a potential problem where people use metagaming in a couple of different ways. A couple of different things. Both of them are defensible, but you need to specify which one's which, in my opinion. Yes, and you need to specify what types are defensible. 9 alignments in their title. Great wheel is the Dungeons and Dragons setting in IMO. I 100% agree, Lloyd. Yep, I absolutely agree. We were talking about this earlier, that alignment is essential to Dungeons and Dragons and the Dungeons and Dragons derived systems. Yeah, it is. It is the one thing that still remains unique to D&D and is consistent across all settings. Or, well, it has been up until modern day. WotC got their hands on it, but Dave says the chart shines when assisting a DM is how to play.
Oh,
The chart shines when assisting a DM as how to play NPCs, not when players are stifled by it. I think this is true of the vast majority of systems. That if players
but
are stifled by it, unless it's by, specifically by design, obviously, like, death is going to stifle a character. But
yeah,
I think that, death is consequence is important.
yeah.
But specifically with regard to alignment, I think that generally speaking, this is true. But I think that players suffering consequences as the result of shifting within their alignment can
Yep.
absolutely be a boon to players. It can foster role play. It can help people explore different areas of their character's psyche that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise have explored. So I do think there's benefit here. But if it is just straight up stifling people, then yeah, get rid of it. I agree.
So, how interesting would it be? Because remember what I said earlier is that for the player characters, at least for everything else and for the world as a whole, the alignment chart is prescriptive
Mm-hmm.
as applied by the GM. For the player characters uniquely, it is descriptive. They have an ability to navigate their way through that alignment chart. How interesting would it be if a lawful good character is afflicted by a curse which switches their alignment as viewed by the universe proscriptively to neutral
Mhm.
evil, and they continue to act in a lawful good manner? What kind of interactions are they going to have with other neutral evil characters
Yeah, that's very
who look
interesting.
at them askance and say, "What the hell are you doing?" Right?
Yeah,
Like, and it, like,
like you are your alignment. What are you doing here?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
that could be fun. That could be
you're not.
absolutely fun.
I like, but how many? But other times, how many times? And some of the greatest RPG stories are of somebody who willfully thought to change their alignment or was afflicted by a spell or curse or something that changed their alignment and then played into type and absolutely just swapped their character. This is metagaming, by the way, done right, and play into that alignment, and everybody around them is like, "What the hell are you doing?" You know.
That could be funny. That's
See,
like
here's the
a
thing too.
Blackadder kind of a campaign, or like
Yeah.
a Monty Python kind of. I think that could be pretty fun. Or like Discworld. Discworld's on Kickstarter at the moment. I think that could be a pretty fun approach.
Not even that. If you swap into a neutral evil and then you start thinking about, wait a minute, all these guys are chumps. How do I make this work to my advantage? And then you start secretly, and nobody notices, but you're playing into type. Like the curse actually has flipped your perspective from other people being from an expansive perspective, being thinking about how your actions are going to affect other people,
Mm-hmm.
to a selfish perspective, a constrictive perspective,
Thinking
only
about how I
thinking
should
about
act.
how it's going to affect you.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you actually play into that and you say, man, these guys are chumps. Boy, if I did this, I would really come out on top, wouldn't I? And nobody notices until everything starts going wrong. How cool is that too, right?
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. You gotta in order to apply this alignment chart properly, you have to understand that there is an impenetrable barrier between along the edge of your table between you and everything that happens on the table. You are not your character. Nobody else is their character. None of the interactions that occur in character are affecting you personally. There's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that as D&D and other TTRPGs have become, other titterpigs, have become pop culture rather than geek culture. One of the problems is a lack of ability to discern the difference between make-believe and reality, to put it bluntly. And what happens to your character does not affect you.
Except for when it does, and then I'm going to come for you in your sleep. I'm kidding. Nerdy Ogre says,
Horror
Miyagi
movie.
put it best. You walk on the left side of the road, you're safe. You walk on the right side of the road, you're safe. You walk down the middle, squish like grape. That's the way to describe light versus dark. Talking about
Talking about Star Wars, yeah, sure. Well,
Luger says a lot of the crunch in 5e comes from the absolutely abysmal layout of the player's handbook. I
yes,
don't have an opinion on that
partly,
because I don't play a lot of 5e, but you do. So what?
he's right. He's right. It's also the ridiculous adherence to quote unquote natural language, which creates all sorts of misunderstandings and
Natural
ambiguities.
language is not common words as they are common.
Right. Yeah. It's just, yeah. When you look at how to lay out a rule book, Pathfinder does it way better. They highlight the words that you need to know in different colors and different fonts, and they have specific definitions for the terms as they're used. 5e's natural language thing is annoying.
Yeah.
I bet you and
Last
I.
comment we have here at the moment is Loidra again says it's easier to damage other. Oh wait, nope, that's the wrong comment. Huh? It's Nerdy Ogre who says also, in my opinion, it should be easier to go from good to evil than it would be to go from evil to good. I think for a human being, yes, because we are selfish, possessive primates, and I think it's easier to act in your own self-interest than it is to be altruistic.
Yeah, but also according to, not entirely, because you also are going to naturally think about your tribe, right? Humans are not only selfish; they are tribal, and that's where it lands on that true neutral.
Yeah, but if you're a tribe of one, I mean, still, look, it depends on sort of where you draw the line, how broadly you draw the circle, right? Who's in it?
Right.
You're going to cater to whoever's in the circle,
right? And the narrow
altruism, I would say, is
circle.
Yeah, I see. I would say altruism is acting good. However you're going to define that, acting good to people outside the circle as well as inside the circle, whereas egoism would be acting good to people inside the circle exclusively.
Yeah.
Or no, that wouldn't even be egoism.
No.
Well, whatever. This isn't a philosophy class. I'll drill down on it in my free time and get back to you with an explanation.
I mean, that's it's a great point. It's a great comment. But
yeah, it is. It is a really good comment.
It's also like what makes the evil alignments, I think, so cartoonish or something that people easily reject is because when you get all the way out to the rim of the wheel on the evil alignment, you are exclusively focused only upon yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And to the exclusion of anyone that is not yourself. And that is anathema to your average human. Your average human being, at very least, has their own family, their nuclear family.
Yes.
Right? They have their parents, they have any siblings if they have any, they have their own children if they have any. Like the nuclear, at the very least, your tribe is not just yourself, although postmodernism has promoted the man as an island idea.
Well, I think
that's a problem, but that's a whole other discussion. However,
no man is an island.
No man is an island unless you have social media. I
do believe that social media is the downfall of the human species. It's going just you wait.
I mean, demographic collapse is a real thing that's happening right now.
I say broadcasting live on YouTube.
Right. Irony. Regardless, though, traditionally speaking, where was I going with this? The idea of the vertical axis on this chart is an inward focus versus an outward focus, so really good and evil in the D&D alignment chart is not necessarily what we would call good and evil as it's traditionally been used in our real life history. What it is equates to a focus of mindfulness on consequence. And evil alignment means you don't focus on any consequence that doesn't directly impact you personally. Whereas good alignment means you are taking into consideration your actions as they affect multiple other people. In fact, sometimes in Star Wars, entire star systems or galaxies. Right?
I don't know if I don't know if I agree with the perspective out of hand, but
if you play it
for
that
the-
way as
for
a
the-
DM, you will
for the
always get
sake
it
of the
right.
conversation, I can agree for sure.
Yeah.
For the sake of, but like, you know, if this
philosophically, it
was
might not be
philosophy
correct.
class, then we'd have to break down into
Sure.
egoism versus altruism, blah blah blah. But like, for the sake of this conversation, I can agree.
Yeah, like this is not a philosophy class, and there are many more nuances than that. But if you play it that way as a DM, you'll pretty much always get it right.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And then, for law to chaos, it's whether or not you follow the rules or whether or not you follow your gut. And this is like you can. And okay, and here's where that comment that you brought up recently. Here's the other thing that you can do is what I like to do. There is an actual alignment chart roll table that I use, and everybody trends toward true neutral. So the way that the rolls work, man, I should have prepared this for the stream as well. But you actually roll it. You're actually rolling a percentile dice, and the farther you get towards the extreme of any particular alignment, the harder it is to move towards that alignment. It's always easier to fall back towards true neutral, and given the actions of each particular player in their individual session that we play, I will roll them on the alignment chart, and their alignment is something that I track. Like they declare who they are and then what their alignment is on character creation. And then I track that as the DM throughout gameplay, and I will tell them when their alignment shifts based on how they behave. But I'm rolling it on a table, and the more that they act towards one particular alignment, the harder it is to push the alignment farther that way, if that makes sense. It's always easier to fall back towards true neutral. Because, again, this is, in one way, it is proscriptive in that everybody tends toward, just like the outlines, right? Everything tends towards true neutral until you actively believe and behave in a certain way to shift yourself out of that towards another alignment. There is a conscious choice involved. It's like entropy. It's like a black hole, if you will. It's like gravity, okay? Or entropy, or whatever you want to call it. It's always pulling you down. And you can just go along with it. And if you just focus on true neutral, you're just going to be a typical tribalistic being focused on yourself and the people immediately around you, or the beings immediately around you. And whatever the situation is, that you're going to behave the way that calls for it. If you are aspiring to something, that means you're pushing against that entropy, you're pushing against gravity, and you're trying to go towards one of the, you're trying to climb your way up one of the spokes into a particular plane. And that's going to require effort. It's going to require conscious thought. It's going to require choice. And if you just do whatever it is that you need to do in the situation, you're always going to kind of spin around that hub. And you're never really going to amount to anything. The reason a hero is because they take a stance, or a villain is a villain, is because they take a stance and they align themselves. They align themselves towards a particular alignment, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So I'm sure that we've kind of run roughshod over a ton of comments at this
No,
point.
no, no. We've actually gotten to, I think, about the end. I am very comfortable ending it here because I am not feeling well. But we got a near 2 hours out of the topic, and I think that this is a topic that we will likely be revisiting.
I'd love to.
I think that this is something that Ben and Jax would quite like to talk about, and I think that especially with regard to metagaming and how I presented the prescriptive nature of alignment, or at least the I'll say the prescriptive component of alignment. It's not the prescriptive nature, it's the component, because there is a prescriptive component inherent to alignment. I think that could be very interesting to hear their opinions on it, whether or not they agree, how they disagree, if they disagree. So I'm very interested to get that conversation going. That'll be next week, next Wednesday. The Wednesday after that is going to be Lou Pulsifer, November 13th at around the same time. Lou is coming back. We're going to discuss.
Excited for that.
Yeah, you're going to be here. So Sable's going to be here. I have not yet floated that past Lou, but he's a very easygoing guy. So I can't imagine that he would be reticent to show up. And so I've invited Sable to participate on that interview.
We're going to discuss, which I very much appreciate.
Oh yeah, of course. So there we're going to discuss. He is curious in what topics would be relevant to include in a book about game design. So we're going to kick that topic around for a little while, see what we can come up with. I, as always, would be very interested to see what the comments in chat bring up. I'm very happy to read those comments to him. I think the last time that I interviewed him, I kind of kept away from chat because I was still kind of finding my feet with this whole thing. Really like chat participation, really like the questions in the comments. So I'm going to be more focused on questions and comments from chat during that interview. So that's what's coming up in the foreseeable future. Don't have any movies scheduled for this Sunday yet, but that's a conversation that I'm going to be having. So we'll figure something out, I'm sure, and I'll get those waiting rooms up. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for the new viewers. So yes, Loisier, the Cthulhu. Yeah. Thank you, Nerdy Ogre, all the regulars, Druden Fuzz, PHR Bex, BGD, Rick,
Dave,
thanks
for coming, guys.
PHR Bex, if I didn't already say that, I think I maybe already did. Who else am I missing? Heath. How can I forget Heath? Absolutely
Rick Rogers,
not. Thank you, Heath.
Dave
I already said BGD. Thank you, BGD. So thank you, everyone, for swinging by. Thank you for watching on replay. I absolutely loved this conversation. I'm really interested in sort of approaching the topic again.
Hey, Nerdy Ogre, 42.
You got it. All right. I'm going to click end stream. You're going to look at my dumb face for a little while, and then it's going to end. So, again, thank you all. I appreciate you all coming out and participating, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.